Hi, Gaetan. All right, maybe Ozma, do you want to kick us off? Or
good morning, everyone. And so you would like us just to introduce ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I am Osma Jefferson. I am the director of Lens Product, and we are very much interested in the disambiguation of an entity resolution of specifically for names and for organization institutions. And we hope that will be our next project that we will tackle in the Lens. Okay. I'm pleased to be here as well. All right. Look forward to this session, Agnes.
Sweet. Ozma, do you want to pick someone? I guess we can go around.
Okay, Nicholas. Maybe we'll start Nicholas.
Oh yeah, thank you. And I don't know if SJ is here, but thank you for the organizers, Agnes and SJ, for the telling me about this and the invitation. I'm Nick. I'm a PhD student at UMass Amherst in computer science. I work kind of at the intersection of machine learning and NLP, and a lot of my research has been in kind of developing new machine learning models that kind of are well suited for problems like entity resolution. And so in the future, and something I'd like to get out of today's session, or thinking about ways we can make like our current work more accessible and to build future work that kind of meets the both accessibility and interpretability, and also maybe like controllability things that people might be looking for in using our work in practice, and thinking about kind of what ways we can be thinking about improving our work to meet those kinds of needs or other needs that might come up. Thanks.
Mary?
Hey, I'm Mary Kallenberg. I'm now at Pace University, and I worked on a project with Adam on finding inventor ages. And so we're just putting up the data this week, ideally. And what I have questions on with especially building new data sets is that a cross reference to other resources is how do we maintain that if there's an individual inventor ID that we have, and that changes over time as more information is added, how can I ensure that what the stuff that I contribute to can be used in the future to add on to that? So I've already come into problems where even though I have identified the identity for the particular inventor IDs that exist, there's still cross-reference issues that occur. And so anything that has like a unique ID that changes over time, this is just one specific example, but there are many. How can I make sure that the data lives in perpetuity so it can be added on to in the future?
Cool. Petrus?
So I'm Petrus Koros. I work at the European Patent Office. I'm patent examiner. In my daily work, I work with patents as examiner, but I also work on some side projects related to patent data. And I have problems with the messy data. That's why I have interest in this session, especially with the data, historical patent data. That names of inventors, names of applicants. I'm here just to hear what other people do and how they solve similar problems. So.
And Pine, if that's how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, it's how I pronounce my name. Hello, everyone. Yeah, actually, Samuel just introduced me to this session. I didn't really know too much about the session before, but I used to be working at Microsoft on a coding tool called Visual Studio Code. And I have done some data collection, reconciliation, and standardizing, mostly in the web space. But I'm pretty much new to the kind of data field. I just thought this session would be kind of eye-opening because I don't really know too much. So yeah, I would be the one who can learn most from the session, hopefully. So yeah, hi everyone.
Sweet. It's great to have you. And Gaetan can't say hi other than virtually, but Bronwyn, do you want to just say hi quickly?
There, okay. Yeah, so I'm just constantly amazed at how much good work is being done in this area. So I just came along to see what the state of the art was, since obviously I worked on this a long time ago and with very primitive methods, Excel spreadsheets in my eyes. And so, oh, and I should have said, for people who don't know, I'm a retired professor from University of California at Berkeley. But I, you know, still do research. In fact, I'm starting to use Lens.
Excellent.
Yeah. So to work on, I actually have a data set with a colleague in Paris, Jacques Mérès, of French physicists with names. And lens.org is going to really help us fill out our data set. I can see that, but it will be mostly manual work by me, I suspect. Okay, who did we miss? Gaetan?
He can't talk.
Oh, he can't talk. Right. I saw him with that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sweet. Hi everyone. Oh, great. Maybe SJ, do you want to introduce yourself quickly while Betsy's just
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm SJ Klein, working on federating public knowledge graphs and public data, and excited about ways that we can reduce duplication of some of these cleaning scripts. Tidy metadata is satisfying to everyone, fine, even if you haven't done a lot of it before.
Yeah, sure. You had to learn.
Betsy, do you want to just introduce yourself?
Sorry, I just popped in too. I'm Bitsy Perlman. I'm an economist at the Census Bureau, and I spend a lot of my time doing data cleaning.
Sweet. SJ, do you want to start?
Sure. Let's see. I'll start and we can trade off for.
Yeah, and I'll just resend links to the slides and to the notes. So we're on the number 3. The notes are everyone's in the same doc, but if you want to just put your name there, and also we'll start to put questions and things in there as we go along.
So speaking of data cleaning, this is partly about what to do when you have messy data, and partly about options you have to reconcile the data that you have as a way of validating that you found something that you were expecting, and also just to reconcile 2 different data sets to see how much you can reduce duplication across them. We're hoping to talk about a few different reconciliation tools. It's great that we have a few people joining who have built their own tools, notably Lens and Patents View, and to discuss what could be useful in having a shared repository of scripts. And if there's interest, to talk about how to get started with OpenRefine, or if you've been using OpenRefine, maybe some tips for how you've been using it in your work. so there are a lot of data pipelines depending on exactly what you're doing, but a common cycle is that you regularly have a data set that you clean up, you merge with other data, you deduplicate and enrich it, and then you export it to a new intermediate data set. And then it gets imported into another part of the pipeline, or maybe shared with a colleague, and you can go back and forth. And you can, there are both some standards that you can apply to make this a lot easier, and there are some tools you can use that have internalized some of those things to make it faster. Agnes, do you want to talk about tidy data?
Yeah, so this is a lovely paper called Tidy Data, which was written now quite a little while ago, but it's kind of about like, there's, you know, in general for publication, for doing a lot of things, even just for just general working with it, everyone ends up having to clean their data one way or another, but there are ways to make it much easier for yourself. And so there's this like great paper which just establishes a bunch of principles for structuring relational data called Tidy Data, in a way that's just kind of intended to like make your life a lot easier when you're handling research data. And so it's still a really nice and like, I think pretty kind of commonly used framework. So yeah, it's been around since like 2014. And yeah, I mean, I think with all of this, there's the kind of like, and I think everyone on this call probably is very familiar with this problem of like the gap between what's required from a data set for publication versus like what is actually required for reproducibility / reusability, and like, you know, building actually like a sustainable tool is very different. And so this is something that we're thinking about a lot, is like building data to actually kind of contribute to a wider ecosystem. And so linked to this is, I guess, what we've also been kind of playfully calling tidy metadata, which is, I mean, pretty much like part of the whole ecosystem of things, but really thinking about having a strong record, not just of like the clean data set itself, but also everything that you did to it to get there, linking the code, linking the schemas, having really good documentation, trying to reconcile the things in your schemas against known entities. And so you can make your data set play well with other data sets. And so there's also a really nice set of guidelines by this group called the Social Science Data Editors, which is also a group that we recommend as a template, for example, for like writing GitHub readmes for publishing code on data and all of these other things. And they've just come up with a really, really great list of like submission guidelines for different kinds of social science data. And so a lot of it is just like, you know, naming stuff, very low tech steps. It's not even in this sense about the structure, it's just like having a document for everything that gets produced, and having a way to link those things together. And so, yeah, we also then on the next slide have this list of kind of projects which help with different stages or approaches to this kind of reconciliation, reproducibility end of data and metadata tidying. So OpenRefine is one that we'll talk about a lot today, and it's worth saying that OpenRefine does like a lot of stuff and it's just really cool. And you can also do like entity reconciliation with it. Wholetail is like a more kind of code-oriented, environment-oriented way of capturing what you've done to a data set. So it basically, it kind of just wraps around your whole pipeline and captures the whole process from start to finish, including like your Python environment files or, you know, whatever code environment you're using. GitHub is a fantastic tool for like versioning code. Okay, so this, yeah, this is the Wholetail website. They've got some cute graphics. They are whale themed. And yeah, GitHub's great. It's like just lets you version data and the code that's used to produce the data. It's really, really good as a structured record for your work, and particularly useful for very long ongoing projects where you want to be able to see the changes in something over time and have different releases. And there's also quite recently there's been published this toolkit under the name of frictionless data. This is a like set of code packages, tooling for showing schemas and for packaging data sets. And this is a project by the Open Data Institute and also looks like a kind of interesting tool. And it's something that I'm definitely going to be playing with in like the next short while, and I think might be a really interesting thing to use. But I think it's also still quite fresh.
One thing I'll say before you move on, Agnes, is that of these projects, the whole tail is the only one that really made me capture everything that was needed to replicate a result. Like in this diagram from the data editors, I usually don't note auxiliary data or the analyses programs used to generate the final results. But if you wanted to just computably reproduce all of the tables, that's necessary. And the whole tail wrapper has a very nice templated approach to that.
Okay.
So that brings us to ND resolution as a part of that whole. If you think of the steps in the process, including aligning your schemas, like aligning the columns across different data sets, and then resolving entities, figuring out whether a string is actually an entity in an ontology or in an index, or it has an identifier that someone else knows. And then data fusion, if you have a lot of sources and you're figuring out which one is actually what you meant, given the composition or some join across a lot of different sources. Each of those has their own pipeline, and we're really just talking about entity resolution here. Some of these tools help with other parts, but OpenRefine in particular started out as an entity resolution tool, and often that's the 20% of the whole that gets you a lot of detail. Currently, sources for this kind of harmonized data around the world can be split up according to the which data sets you care about. These are, this is from a nice overview that Daeunian produced a few months ago. It would be great to fill out more of these. Some of them don't really have a good data set. If you want gender identification for Chinese inventors, that's hard to come by. And it's nice that Lens is starting to appear as a unified source for some of these across all these sources. But we don't yet have particularly clean unified geocoding and gender identification. There was a workshop recently, and I think a couple of you were there and may even have presented, hosted by the PTO and Patents View. And some of the current best available services include Patents View for disambiguation of inventors and assignees and locations, Lens for providing a meta record that tries to tie everything together, and there aren't yet obvious benchmarks for many of these to figure out, when you have a mix of services to choose from, which one is best for your task. This benchmark is possibly the first example of a source data set and benchmarks across each of the steps in the pipeline to help you see with a coherent set of use cases how well a new tool that you're developing does. There's a lot more effort around name disambiguation than some of the other topics that matter, like organization disambiguation, or maybe this age disambiguation data set or age estimation data set. That sounds great. Or some of the many flavors of geography, what geography could mean to you. And just so, if all you're focused on is disambiguation or reconciliation of a string, sometimes you know that you're disambiguating a name. It's a name field, great. Sometimes, increasingly, people are as we build machine learning models to do entity extraction, you're extracting a bunch of tokens, and you might think that this token is a name and some other tokens are a citation. But it can be useful to have a general purpose reconciliation service. So OpenRefine is currently the canonical tool for hosting a service that anyone can send a string to and get back a bunch of potential results. And as an example, there are a lot of other tools that will just use that as a drop-in service for this. Dataset is an easy tool for playing around with SQLite databases, and it has a way that you can. It has a canonical OpenRefine endpoint that it will query, and then you tell it things like the search column that you care about, and the ID column that you care about, and your source, and what you think the right scoring metric is, and it will give you a list of scored ranked entities that it might be tied to. So, are there currently public recon services? Yes, you can play around with them. Here's a nice catalog maintained by the Reconciliation Working Group at the W3C. There are at least 35. There are a lot that go up and down, but these have been pretty stable over the last year. Can you resolve against multiple ontologies at once? In general, most of these reconciliation APIs are for a single authority file. So there's one, like the VIAF runs one of these endpoints, and if you want to reconcile something against their database, you can use it. You can try resolving against multiple ontologies at once. There's only one public service that I know of that does this. This is using DBpedia, which started with Wikidata as the backend, and now it includes most of the OpenRefine endpoints. And so if you ask it, if you give it a string, it will give you VF, OEKG, bio to RDF. These aren't necessarily all the same Adam Jaffe. But then in addition to some kind of distance scoring, you also have the source. And you might have to come up with your own metric for how much you trust that source, given what you want. If you're looking for a patent, or bio RDF might not be that promising. And finally, is there a shared list of scripts and benchmarks to see how well we're doing with disambiguation? There are a bunch of collections online. There's a lot of open code out there, but we can do better. So take a look at our data processing scripts repository. Maybe we can discuss what aspects would be useful. We've had requests for scripts that do a range of things, even some backend processing like web scraping. There are so many scrapers to choose from. Which one do you want if you expect you're going to be scraping patent data?
And it's worth also adding also. It's just one thing to add, and this is something I can also demonstrate at the end, but if you haven't used it, OpenRefine has fantastic built-in entity reconciliation you can do like within like a table. And so while there are really usable, if this is something you're into, APIs, and you can write your own API calls, there's also, if that's not something you're like, I'm not about to start writing a bunch of scripts to do reconciliation of my data, OpenRefine actually has a lot of this stuff built in. So it's really impressive and really effective. And so there's also like, there's a really nice kind of midway point where you're actually not having to really write very much code, but you can do a lot of really kind of complex and exciting things with one of these endpoints. Same in standing them up. I mean, dataset, like dataset, double TE, datasets are really easy to publish. And the software basically has like a one-liner for then standing up a data set that you've produced as an entity reconciliation endpoint, which is pretty neat. And so that's also a nice thing to look into. And I feel like proliferating entity reconciliation APIs is like a really great project.
Right. This is one case where making a new one is actually handy, because there are lots of tools that are just merging them all into a single meta service.
So we thought now that we've got, I think, about half an hour, a little bit less. And what we thought now is that it would be a nice time to have a discussion. And then kind of if people are interested, there's also, we can do like a short OpenRefine tutorial demo. But that's also something, we've got a slide that's just full of tutorials that we'd recommend as well. And so if we all just want to chat for longer, then that's something I can just direct everyone to as well. So it's kind of up to everyone.
I a question for Osman. But it's, you know, it's somehow I do a little better with concrete examples, and this is a concrete example. Osman, when I'm looking up a scientist on the lens, I frequently find the same scientist, you know, 3 versions of his name. You know, one with an initial and one with his full name, and it's pretty much clear that they're actually the same scientist. And the question I have is there a way for me to combine them on the lens, or do I need to just download the data and then combine it myself?
No.
I don't want to change it for everyone. It's just that I want to, for my own purposes, say that these are the same person.
So in the structured search page, you can combine them. You can put them together using the Boolean operator or, and then get them all together, and then make a collection, and then you have everything, and then you can edit your collection. I'm happy to demonstrate Brown.
No, I can see that. That makes sense. So the question is whether there's any way one can feed back the information that you know, that something like that, you know, this is the sort of thing that's going to come up a lot. I have a feeling when you start looking at inventors, that you aren't able to do the cleaning that, you know, the amount of cleaning that is necessary.
And we do have a way which is called authentication of your inventorship or authorship. So if you come to an article, and if I can share my screen, let me see here. Is that okay, Agnes, if I share my screen?
Oh yeah, that would be great. Please.
Okay. So so let me go to can you see my screen now?
Yeah.
All right. So I want to. So if you go to structure search and you look for authors, okay, the author display name, and then if you type Adam, for example, you will get an auto suggest for the different version of Adam, if you will. And then if you click on the command button, then I could add these 3, 4, whatever they are similar, if you will, and then put or instead of and, then I'll get all the variation of that name, okay? And then once I have, this is just for example, that these are all the same name, and then I have all this is my collection, so I can select all the results, okay? And then first I have to sign in, because in order for to collect and to make a collection, you need to be signed in. And so once you have selected all the results, save them as create a new collection. And when you collect or make a collection, you have an option to make it either active dynamic collection, wherein the updates, all the updates are automatic, and it will be automatically updated. Or so you can make it dynamic, or you can keep it static, if you will. Add all the result you want, decide whether you want to share it with everyone, or you make it public, or you want to restrict it only for your access at the beginning. Because if you make it shareable publicly, then everyone who is working on the same topic can discover your public collection, okay? So you have a choice here between 3 options: share it publicly, limited sharing, or restricted privately, okay? Because with the lens, remember, there are many anonymous users. We don't track users, and some of them use the lens without any logging in. And so we give them options to maintain that information. Okay, so once we save the collection, for example, and I can show you a saved collection from mine to give you a concrete example. And so I'm going to look at the genetic variant of COVID, okay, of SARS. And in my collection, if I look and I'm analyzing it manually and I find that this author is not, for example, this first author, Zood Van, is not actually relevant or part of this article that I want. So all I have to do is click on that article and I say remove from the collection. And then it gives me a choice to remove it from any of the parent collection or the sub-collection. So I am now, if I have made different sub-collection from the parent collection, I have a choice to edit and remove from across different collections. Okay, it is part of my analysis. If I find this article is useful for another collections that I've made, I can say add to a collection, and then it gives me an option to add it to any of the collections that I made.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's how you can manage you're grouping the authors or the inventors in a collection, and then you'll be able to edit a little bit manual. But then if you come across this article and I say, oh, I know this guy or this girl, and I want to be able to authenticate. So this guy has an ORCID ID, it comes, and he can record the authorship. So that means we could verify that this person is actually that person who wrote this article. So for name verification, if they authenticate their authorship, that means we have it in the back end already involved and it's disambiguated. So that helps in the disambiguation process because it is author-driven or user-driven disambiguation. Okay, so either in the inventorship or in the authorship, they can go to their work, and we're hoping that the institutions as well, like libraries, could do that, authenticate their collections when they have. And then once they are authenticated, that means we verify the source, we are more confident of the data, and everybody sees that these are the authenticated record that they could use.
So going forward, we expect ORCID IDs to be attached to journal articles, to individuals on journal articles. I mean, what I'm really trying to say is relying on people to authenticate on Lens is probably not going to get you a lot of coverage. But relying on journals to, to supply ORCIDs with the authors is much more likely to produce full coverage.
Yes, and not only, we don't just rely on publishers, we have integrated and ingested the ORCID ID into the authors based on their record. So we are trying to reconcile now the ORCID ID with the MAG ID for authors. And that's another issue where we are finding that some authors may have 3 MAG IDs, for example, and some have even the ORCID ID, some have 2 ORCID IDs. And so we are trying to harmonize and reconcile that messiness into this, and how can you aggregate it using an aggregator like Lens ID that brings in together that variability and organize it in a taxonomical relationship. Okay.
I probably should not derail this.
No, sorry.
There are other questions from other people.
I was just going to say that feels like a nice reference to Mary's question from earlier as well. This idea of making nice records.
All right, I'll stop sharing. So I didn't want to take over the, okay, but just to answer the question.
Oh, can I just ask, does it support any kind of such identifier? Could someone provide like a researcher homepage or email address or, Wikipedia article ID in addition to ORCID and MAG?
Yes, and we are trying to see how we can add other metadata into it. Okay, so and yes, you are right. So for example, we can add the email addresses. So now we are putting in the new patent architecture, for example, that we are releasing in the preview site, and you can access it through previewlens.org. And you can find applicant addresses, agent addresses. So we can link that information into the name, and so we'll be able to do it. And we hope that we would be able to integrate patents view disambiguated inventor list into that as well, and assembling it into a meta record concept that we have talked about in the USPTO symposium. So that's the plan right now and hopefully it's all, as you know, from your work, it's all incremental progress. So if you have made, like 20% increase, somebody else made 10% increase, or others, if we pull it together, then we can make a substantive improvement on the data. And that's the idea behind it.
That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess, sorry, one more question, if I may. Can you also specify, if one author is listed with one lens ID, what other lens ID you think it should have?
So the lens ID is used not just as a one-to-one relationship. Okay, that's the point about the lens ID. The lens ID is an aggregator of the variants of the name. And the lens ID is flexible, that with every update, if there is an issue, that we would be able to reconcile the logging history to maintain the lens ID itself as a representative of the variants, so that you could have interoperability between the different name. So the lens ID is an aggregator. Remember, it's not just a one-to-one representative of the name. Okay, because we can generate that lens ID multiple times.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. And it's we all know it's not going to be a trivial task, huh? and so we will have to go back and forth quite a bit, and we hope that we will be able to make use of what, let's say, EPO has done with applicant names, the manually curated data set, as well as what USPTO has done and Patents View have done. So we would be able to combine that effort and make an additional progress on it.
I'm curious about how people edit or suggest updates.
Is this for me as well?
Well, Nicholas first.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I guess right now our system can use, I think, some improvement. I think most of it goes through kind of personal communication and a few kind of form-based communications through Patents View. And then we have places in our model where we can add, spot fixes or rules that will cause like a change in the disambiguation. But it's not something that has the same like nice public API of offering edits that we just saw with Lens. So I think in Patents View, and also kind of more broadly in some of the other entity resolution work that goes on in our lab at UMass, we are thinking about ways to allow anyone to suggest, a wide variety of kinds of edits, not just things like, this is the identifier for some person, or this name variation should be assigned to this inventor, but things like the inventor that works on subject area A also works on subject area B. Things that could be easily expressed by someone looking at a page about some inventor and then have kind of a easy interface to cause the kinds of changes that you would want to happen. For instance, if some inventor works on two very different topics and is currently split in the database, that person or someone who knows that person's work could observe the page, offer some edit that says, nope, these are actually the same person. We can see a resulting merge of the entities. And similarly for splitting things, maybe someone's page is incorrectly clumped and you want to say that the person who has affiliation 1 is not the same as the person with affiliation 2. And more broadly, thinking about ways that people can offer edits in kind of not exactly natural language, but things like there exists constraint about the existence of some entity. Like there is, someone in the world who meets these criteria or has these properties. And so this is an active area of research. It's not in kind of our code on GitHub today, but it's something that we're interested in doing. And this is also in something that is, I think, we've been thinking about this in the case where the editors of the pages are kind of not malicious, and how to deal with kind of malicious edits and people making edits for the sake of harming others or helping themselves in ways they shouldn't be are considerations that would need to be taken pretty seriously. But in terms of what's there today, we basically have a way to kind of incorporate must and should not link constraints and things like mapping two spellings of the assignee or inventor name to be the same. These are the kinds of things that, if you tell me to add some things to the dictionary file, I can do that. And that's about where we are, unfortunately. Yeah. But I would love to know if there are kind of interactive, if people have interactive models in mind for what would be useful or what would work, or if people have thoughts on kind of handling malicious edits. I would love to hear others' thoughts on these. Yeah.
Having a raw feed, allowing people to make the changes so that it's visible to other interested reviewers, but not making it visible to people who just want to download the data, can sometimes work. That stops some kinds of bad inputs.
Yeah.
I was going to ask Bitsy how this mapped onto her experience figuring out how to disambiguate geographic boundaries, but
maybe Mary, if you wanted to elaborate a bit on the like identifier matching problem that you're having. It sounds like maybe the lens meta record is like a way that could kind of fit together or something.
Yeah, sure. I guess the issue is more that we use identifier from a specific time period, of which then we scraped information related to that user on their age, and then tried to reconcile the ages given when there's multiple hits and that kind of thing. But the issue is that when we tried to then combine it with more updated data, is that because the inventor IDs change, that it's then hard to reconcile which inventor ID is associated with this new data set, because now the patent correspondence has changed. And so we lose, in that merge, we lost, I don't know, a couple, like tens of thousands of inventors, which in the scheme of things is not actually a ton. But it's that, amount of, that means though, if in the future, as more data arrives of patents to link the patents to the inventor, we're going to start losing more and more as the inventor IDs change. So that's the nature of disambiguation with the inventor IDs. As you find more information, you find better information about that particular inventor ID, but then kind of our date, we get information about the age of inventors, decreases over time. That's kind of the problem that we're facing right now. My only solution to that was to say, these are the inventor IDs I have citing the particular inventor ID that's located, and provide the crosswalk of patents that at the time, so those patents are associated with those inventors at that time period. That's kind of like the only thing I could think of, but open to other ideas of how to kind of ensure that going forward, things can, we don't lose too much of that information. I don't know if I explained myself well enough.
No, I think you did well, Marie. And I think what's happening is that we are noticing as well that many of the academic users, they are facing this issue because they work for a certain limited time frame on a certain data set, as well as on certain jurisdiction. And then they end up with the data that's not reconcilable or can be put together because it's, of course, things change. And we take examples like Klein code. And Klein code, even at patent offices, they have changed in terms of what they mean over time based on different policies in the patent office itself. They change the Klein codes, and therefore to reconcile what do they mean and over time and keep that consistent and available is an issue. And that's why I think you might want to look at the way catalogers in the libraries have dealt with a bibliographic information that's complex using the super work concept, which is that means to follow up over time and space that changes in an entity and how you can construct a taxonomic functional relationship that is lasting. Okay, so there is the meta record concept that we go, and it's available as an open access article online. So you're welcome to just take a look at it and let me think what your thoughts or feedback on it. Because that's the way that we thought that we could solve it, and at least in the record, for scholarly records as well as patent record, we're able to apply that, and we hope that we will be able to apply it to names as well as institutions.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll take a look at that and see what I can kind of do with that. In an ideal world where I had unlimited time, I would, just re-scrape this every, year or so. But the problem with that is that where our sources, they change their, the way you can access the data. So then you have to rewrite the scrape, and that takes time to figure out all the loopholes for that. So there's others, although that would be my backup of this was just redo this and then reconcile the information, at least going forward, also to add new inventors and stuff.
Yeah.
Can I ask, is the way the scraping works that it takes as input the disambiguated inventor IDs?
Yeah. So it basically says, so the inventor ID says here, these are all they basically look at all the patents associated with that inventor ID and say, okay, here is the states and location. So we look at the unique ones. So if they didn't move, it doesn't matter, but inventors move. So we use the state and city information and the full name of the inventor. And that also presents, and the disambiguation helps too, if there's a middle name or not a middle name missing, all that kind of thing. So we say, we take it as like, you know, this is relatively accurate. And then say these are the city and states, and then ping the directories for information of the ages based on the city and state, all of them that they've lived at.
Oh yeah, I see. I was thinking because if it was a function of the raw records, then you would know like for each raw record an associated age, and then you would have that like ability to track. But yeah, I see. Okay.
But the whole idea of like the project in general is that, you know, we want to follow inventors and see like how much they're patenting over time, and when they patent, how old they were, and what kind of patents they produced, and that. So that's why we went that approach rather than individual patents.
Yeah.
We're going to reconnect in the main session in 4 or 5 minutes. So we should try to summarize some of the conversation and remaining questions that people can work through.
Maybe if Klein, Petrus, or Betsy have any comments, or Matt have any comments as well, it would be great to hear from you guys too. Wow.
So I cannot comment about the official position of the EPO. And I cannot comment about the way how it's done in our office, but I can comment about my projects, side projects, because nowadays many examiners are involved in some semi-official projects with the patent data, with machine learning, artificial intelligence, because
Oh, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Come back.
No. Oh no.
It just dropped out for a second. You can type it in chat if you need to.
Alas.
No, sorry. You can leave a note in the notes. I'll include the link to them again. I wanted to hear the end of that.
Yeah.
Matt, how are you feeling about all of this these days? Does it feel like it's getting easier over time?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just mostly trying to categorize all of the attendees at all the meetings by their disciplines, like econ versus management. So I'm like halfway through the list. I'm just finished.
Like
You're basically carrying out in real time what we're talking about.
Yeah, disambiguating the disambiguation workshop.
Well, there are some names that are hard, like Michael Park. I was like, how do I find Michael Park on the web? So it's interesting. Back to your question on, I'm sorry, I'll confess, I've not been listening closely because I'm like on a deadline for this grant. I'm trying to pull this together.
No, you're fine.
But let me think. Can you ask the question again? Sorry.
Oh, just if you feel that disambiguation is getting easier over time, if the challenges in
no, why would it get easier? It's horrible and awful. It always has been. I thought what the USPTO did with inventor disambiguation was really good, because they had a bake-off, right? They bring together like 4 or 5 different approaches and say, we're going to test. Because sometimes what happens is like some grant agency like christens this effort as you will do it. But, you know, a lot of people have worked on inventor disambiguation. So then the patent office is like, well, let's see what works best. And then they adopted it. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. But the company names, oh, you get, that's vicious and hard. And actually, here's the hardest thing is kind of within a domain, it's one thing, like inventor disambiguation, but what about matching people across domains, like inventors who have also written scientific papers, because then you can't rely on the assigning name being the same. You can't rely on a bunch of fields that have already been harmonized, like location and so on. You have to, yeah, that's tricky.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, we can.
I don't know how much you heard from my previous words, but so that in my projects, so that we try to recognize persons, also using in addition patent classification and location information. So that, but it's still a project under development and no real results. Because we believe that it's possible to improve the recognition of particular inventor if we limit to some particular field.
So I have a question, if I can, I think maybe for the EPO or Bronwyn sent us a note saying that EPO decided not to have the address of the inventor listed on the patent recently. Is this a new?
Also, I heard it from non-official sources, but I never saw any official announcement. Therefore, I cannot comment.
Okay.
Because we are a very huge organization, and patent publication is separated there in Vienna, Austria, and I don't know about this plan. Nothing.
All right. Thank you.
But I believe that the data will be available in the official register. You know, that the data will be online, they will be retrievable. But it's my personal opinion.
Are there other services like that it would be great to have provided by some of the data sources? I feel in addition to gathering the scripts that people do use, we could gather requests for things that people have to estimate because they don't exist. Asma, when you go looking for that, is there any way for you to actually file a request?
Do you ask me?
I was asking Asma in that case.
Okay, please repeat, Sam.
If you're looking for inventor address on the main patent for EPO patents, is there a way to register your interest or to register the request?
I'm not sure, but the information right now is available. Like we have in the new patent meta record, we released the inventor and applicant addresses. And so you can search it in the lens. But if the rule has changed, that means they will not make that information available publicly to download with the metadata, you know, when available, then that's a major change in the availability. And it could be as a privacy policy, you know, in Europe, if that information is becoming private and they are not disclosing it publicly, that means we will lose the geolocation, if you will, information on that, and that will affect disambiguation. I mean, I'm looking in the long term, but yeah, we'll see. I think we'll have to see what DocDB data will show in the future releases.
Well, thank you all. We're going to reconvene, I think, Agnes, in a couple minutes.
That's good. Thank you all. I just wanted to also say as much. I think that the lens.org ID system is really nice, and while we were speaking, sent it to many of my lab mates to go look at.
Thank you.
Anyway, thank you for all
Nicolas.
the pointers.